I didn't lose my company the day I walked out of that ballroom. I lost my family. I can still see my reflection in those glass doors at the Calder Grand, distorted and pale, while inside, champagne glasses clinked and people laughed. The applause thundered through the walls, and I knew, God, I knew, it was for her. For Serena, my sister. The woman who'd just announced to a room full of investors, partners, and our entire family that I was being realigned, out of the company I'd built from nothing. The word she used, the one that still echoes in my head at 3 in the morning, was obsolete. But let me back up. Because if I'm going to tell you this story, you need to understand how we got here. You need to see what they couldn't see, what they refused to see, until it was far too late. This story starts 23 years ago, in a dying shopping plaza on the east side of Harbor Point, where my father, Thomas Ellison, ran a struggling electronics kiosk that sold charging cables, phone cases, and outdated computer accessories. The kind of place you'd walk past without noticing, sandwiched between a defunct shoe repair shop and a vape store that changed owners every 6 months. I was 19 then, still in community college, studying computer science because it was cheap and I could take night classes. Serena was already at Princeton, sending home photos of ivy-covered buildings and prestigious internships. Mom would pin them to the fridge like trophies, smiling at them while she made coffee, while I was already at the kiosk by 6 a.m., helping Dad unload inventory from the back of his truck. Mara, these boxes aren't going to move themselves, he'd say, not unkindly, but with that exhausted frustration of a man watching his dreams circle the drain. He never asked Serena to help. She was meant for bigger things, he'd say. She was going to make something of herself. I remember the exact moment I realized I'd become invisible to them. It was Thanksgiving my sophomore year. Serena came home with this guy, Preston or Porter, something deliberately elite, and the whole dinner revolved around her stories. Her internship at Goldman Sachs. Her networking events. Her future. And what about you, Mara? Porter Preston asked, probably trying to be polite. I opened my mouth to talk about the inventory management system I'd coded for the kiosk, how it had reduced our overhead by 30%, how I'd started offering repair services and brought in actual foot traffic for the first time in years. Mara's helping your father with the shop, Mom interrupted, smiling. It's very sweet of her. Sweet. Like it was charity work. Like I wasn't the reason we'd made rent 3 months in a row. Serena smiled at me across the table, that perfect, practiced smile, and said, That's so admirable, March. Not everyone needs to chase the big dreams, you know? Someone has to keep the foundation stable. I should have seen it then. That condescension wrapped in concern. That ability to diminish you while making it sound like a compliment. But I loved my sister. I love my family. So I smiled back and said nothing, and I went back to the kiosk the next morning while she slept in until 11. The breakthrough came 2 years later, almost by accident. One of our regular customers, a guy named Marcus who ran a small accounting firm down the street, kept coming in with the same problem. His computer would crash whenever he tried to run reports with their client database. Every tech support line he called gave him the runaround. So one slow Tuesday, I told him to bring it in. You sure? He asked, skeptical. No offense, but you guys sell phone chargers. I also write code, I said. Let me look. The problem wasn't the hardware. It was a conflict between his accounting software and a Windows update, creating a memory leak that cascaded into system failure. I wrote a small patch in about 4 hours, tested it, and handed him back a laptop that ran smoother than it had in months. He tried to pay me $200. Marcus, I can't. You just saved me 3 weeks of downtime and probably $5,000 in lost productivity, he said, pulling out his wallet. Take the money, Mara. He came back the next week with his business partner, then 2 of their clients, then someone from the marketing agency on the 3rd floor. Within a month, I was doing more repair and custom software work than we were selling retail inventory. Dad watched this happen with a mixture of pride and confusion. You're really good at this, he said one evening, after I'd just finished a consultation that netted us $800. Thanks, Dad. Maybe we should, I don't know, make it official? Offer it as a real service? That's how Ellison Dynamics was born. Not with fanfare or venture capital or a business plan written at Princeton. With me, in a back room that smelled like solder and old carpet, solving problems nobody else wanted to touch. The first year, we cleared $80,000 in profit. The second year, $240,000. By year 3, I'd built proprietary diagnostic software that we were licensing to other repair shops across Harbor Point. We moved out of the kiosk and into actual office space, nothing fancy, but it had windows and a conference room and business cards that didn't feel like lies. Dad couldn't believe it. Mom cried when we signed the lease. And Serena? Serena was in London doing something with derivatives and sending home pictures of herself at galas. I worked 90-hour weeks. I missed birthdays, holidays, any semblance of a social life. I dated a guy named Alex for 4 months before he left me because, in his words, I was married to a computer screen. He wasn't wrong. While my friends from high school were getting engaged and starting families, I was building something real. Something mine. I thought that would be enough. I thought if I just worked hard enough, proved myself enough, they'd finally see me. I was so goddamn naive. Serena came home the week we hit our first $1 million in annual revenue. I heard you've been doing amazing things with Dad's little shop, she said, hugging me at the airport. She smelled like expensive perfume and ambition. I'm so proud of you, March. It's not really a shop anymore, I said, trying not to sound offensive. We're actually. I know. Mom sent me the articles. Very impressive. She linked her arm through mine as we walked to baggage claim. You know what? I think I'm done with New York. All that finance stuff, it's soulless. I miss home. I miss family. Something cold settled in my stomach, but I pushed it away. That's great, Serena. We'd love to have you back. Actually, I was thinking, and tell me if this is crazy, but maybe I could help out? With the company? You've built something incredible, but you're not really a people person, right? That's not an insult, she added quickly. You're brilliant with the technical stuff. But marketing, investor relations, public image, that's more my arena. We'd be unstoppable together. If you're watching this and thinking, don't do it. Yeah, I know. Believe me, I know. But here's the thing about family. About sisters who've always been the favorite, who've always gotten the praise you never quite earned. When they finally offer to stand beside you instead of above you, it feels like validation. Like maybe, finally, you're equals. So I said yes. Dad practically threw a party when I told him Serena was joining the company. He didn't ask what her role would be, didn't question her qualifications. He just beamed and said, both my girls, working together. This is what I always wanted. Mom actually cried. Again. We set up a dual leadership structure. I was chief technology officer, which was accurate, since I'd built every system we used, and Serena became chief operating officer. On paper, we were co-equals. In practice, the first warning sign came during our first board meeting. We didn't have a Real board. It was me, Serena, Dad, and our lawyer Daniel Roth, but Serena insisted we needed to professionalize our image. I've prepared a presentation on our growth strategy, she announced, pulling up slides I'd never seen before. They were beautiful. Slick graphics, market projections, competitive analysis. They also barely mentioned the actual technology that made our business work, instead focusing on brand positioning and market penetration and other consulting buzzwords that sounded important but meant nothing. This is impressive, Daniel said. Where did you get this data? I have connections from my finance days, Serena said smoothly. People who understand how to scale a business beyond local presence. I wanted to point out that our local presence was currently serving clients in 14 states. That we'd grown sustainably without burning investor cash or making promises we couldn't keep. But Dad was nodding along, Mom was beaming with pride, and I was, once again, the quiet one in the corner. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button, because the next part gets intense, and you won't want to miss what happens when betrayal goes nuclear. The shift happened gradually, then all at once. Serena started taking meetings without me. Just preliminary discussions, she'd say. I didn't want to waste your time with the boring stuff. Then those preliminary discussions would turn into commitments, partnerships, press releases, all bearing the Ellison Dynamics name. none requiring my approval. She hired a PR firm. Suddenly we were in business magazines, tech blogs, local news. And somehow, in every single story, the narrative was the same. Serena Ellison, the visionary leader who'd returned from Wall Street to revolutionize her father's struggling business. My name appeared in exactly 2 articles, both times as technical support staff. "You have to say something," Daniel told me one evening, after Serena had scheduled a pitch to investors without consulting me. "She's rewriting history. She's my sister. She's erasing you." But I didn't want to cause drama. I didn't want to be the bitter, jealous sibling who couldn't handle sharing success. So I stayed quiet, worked harder, and watched as Serena gave TED-style talks about innovation and disruption, using systems I'd spent years building. The worst part? She was good at it. Really good. She knew exactly what investors wanted to hear, exactly how to pitch our technology, without understanding it. She'd reference our proprietary algorithms and cutting-edge diagnostic frameworks with such confidence that nobody questioned whether she could actually code. She couldn't. I'd seen her try to use basic Excel formulas. But she could smile at the right people, laugh at the right jokes, make them feel like they were part of something special. And in business, apparently that mattered more than actually building the thing everyone was investing in. We hit $5 million in revenue the year Serena joined, $10 million the year after. By year 3, we were approaching $20 million, had a staff of 43, and were fielding acquisition offers from companies I'd dreamed about working for when I was 19 and drowning in community college debt. I should have been ecstatic. Instead, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. "Mara seems tired lately," I heard Mom say to Dad one evening when they thought I was in my office. "Do you think the stress is getting to her?" "Serena's really stepped up," Dad replied, "taking so much off Mara's plate. I think maybe, I don't know, maybe Mara's better suited to the background work anyway. She never liked the spotlight. I never had the chance to like it. They never gave me the chance." The birthday party was Dad's 70th. Serena insisted on hosting it at the Calder Grand, the most expensive hotel in Harbor Point. "He deserves something special," she said. "And it's good optics for the company." Everything was optics with Serena. I should have known something was wrong when she asked me to prepare a presentation. "Just an overview of our technical achievements," she said. "For Dad. He'd love to see everything we've accomplished." I spent 2 weeks on it. Diagrams, metrics, case studies. A complete history of every major innovation we deployed. I was actually excited. Finally, a chance to show Dad what I'd really built. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, a string quartet. 200 people in cocktail attire, sipping champagne that probably cost more than my first car. Investors, business partners, local politicians. Half the city's business elite seemed to be there. "This is too much," Dad said, but he was smiling. He looked happy. Really happy. Serena clinked her glass, and the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my father, Thomas Ellison, and 70 years of an incredible life." Pause for applause. She was good at timing. Many of you know that my father started his entrepreneurial journey with a small electronics kiosk. What you might not know is how that humble beginning transformed into Ellison Dynamics, one of the fastest-growing tech service companies in the region. Here it comes, I thought. Here's where she thanks me, acknowledges the work, brings me up on stage. When I left Wall Street 3 years ago, I saw potential in what Dad had started. Raw potential, but it needed vision. It needed structure. It needed someone who understood how to transform a mom-and-pop operation into a scalable enterprise. My chest tightened. I'm proud to say that, with Dad's support and the dedication of our incredible team, we've grown from a single location to a multi-state operation. From 50,000 in annual revenue to over 20 million. From obscurity to industry recognition. People were applauding. Dad was crying. Mom had her hand over her mouth, beaming. And I was standing there, champagne glass frozen halfway to my lips, watching my sister accept credit for 7 years of my life. "But tonight isn't just about celebrating the past," Serena continued, and something in her tone made my stomach drop. It's about securing our future, which is why I'm excited to announce some leadership changes that will position Ellison Dynamics for our next phase of growth.
No.
As our company has matured, so too must our leadership structure. Effective immediately, I'll be transitioning to CEO with sole authority over strategic direction and operations. The room was silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. This will allow us to move faster, make clear decisions, and present a unified vision to our partners and investors. My sister Mara has been instrumental in our technical development, and she'll continue in a consulting capacity, focusing on the specialized back-end work she's most comfortable with. Consulting capacity. Specialized back-end work. Most comfortable with. Every word was a knife. Perfectly placed. I know change can be difficult, Serena said, looking directly at me for the first time. But growth requires evolution. And sometimes that means acknowledging when someone's skill set is better suited to a supporting role rather than a leadership position. Supporting role. Dad was nodding. Actually nodding, like this made perfect sense. I stood up. The movement drew every eye in the room. Mara, Serena said, her voice honey-sweet with concern. Are you all right? I could have screamed. Could have thrown my champagne glass. Could have listed every line of code I'd written, every client I'd saved, every innovation she'd taken credit for. I could have burned it all down right there. Instead, I smiled. Congratulations, Serena, I said, loud enough for the room to hear. I hope you know what you're doing. Then I walked out, leaving my presentation on the table, my purse on the chair, everything except my phone and my car keys. I didn't run, didn't cry, just walked through that ballroom, past the ice sculptures and the champagne fountains and the string quartet playing something classical and expensive, while 200 people watched the obsolete sister make her exit. The glass doors closed behind me, and the applause started again inside. That's when I called Daniel. I need you to pull every contract, every incorporation document, every licensing agreement, and every intellectual property filing we've ever done, I said. Tonight. I don't care if it takes until morning. Mara, what happened? Just do it. And Daniel? Don't tell anyone. Not Dad, not Serena. No one. Because here's what Serena didn't know. Here's what none of them knew. When I incorporated Ellison Dynamics 7 years ago, Dad couldn't be the primary owner. He had tax issues from the kiosk, liens from creditors. Daniel had advised me to structure it differently, to protect the business from Dad's existing debts. So I'd incorporated it under my name. Mara Ellison, 100% ownership. Dad was listed as an advisor. When Serena joined, I'd given her a title and a salary, but I'd never transferred equity. She'd never asked to see the incorporation documents, and I'd never volunteered them. Why would I? She was my sister. We were partners. Except we weren't. We'd never been partners. And every piece of proprietary software, every diagnostic algorithm, every system integration that made Ellison Dynamics valuable, I'd registered them under a separate entity I'd created 3 years ago on Daniel's advice for liability protection. A little company called Blackline Systems that licensed its technology to Ellison Dynamics. Blackline Systems, owned entirely by me. The licensing agreement had a clause. A very specific clause that Daniel had insisted on that I'd thought was paranoid at the time. It stated that if leadership at Ellison Dynamics changed without my written approval, Blackline Systems retained the right to terminate all licensing agreements with 30 days' notice. Serena had just changed leadership without my approval. She'd done it publicly, humiliatingly, in front of everyone who mattered. And she'd just activated the nuclear option. I spent that night in Daniel's office, going through every document, every contract, every email. By sunrise, we had a complete picture. Without Blackline Systems technology, Ellison Dynamics was just an expensive brand name and a bunch of service contracts they couldn't fulfill. Every client agreement referenced our proprietary diagnostic software. Every partnership was built on capabilities that Serena literally could not deliver without me. This will destroy the company, Daniel said quietly. Your father's legacy. My father just watched my sister humiliate me and said nothing, I replied. His legacy chose its side. If you're still watching, hit that like button because what comes next is the most satisfying reversal you'll see all week. I waited 3 days. Let them enjoy the victory. Let Serena give interviews about her new role. Let dad send proud emails to distant relatives. Let mom post Facebook photos from the party. Then I sent the email. It went to Serena, dad, and every board advisor simultaneously. Subject line: licensing termination notice. The body was short. Effective 30 days from today, Blackline Systems will terminate all licensing agreements with Ellison Dynamics. This includes diagnostic software, client management systems, and all proprietary algorithms currently in use. This action is taken in accordance with Section 7.3 of our licensing agreement, triggered by unauthorized leadership changes. Regards, Mara Ellison, CEO, Blackline Systems. Attached were 47 pages of legal documentation they'd apparently never read. My phone started ringing 6 minutes later. I didn't answer. I was already in the Ellison Dynamics office, sitting in the conference room I'd basically lived in for 7 years, waiting. Serena arrived first, dad 30 seconds behind her. She looked like she'd run from her car. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, waving her phone. "It's a licensing termination notice," I said calmly. I thought the subject line was pretty clear. "You can't do this." "Actually, I can. Read Section 7.3. Dad's face had gone pale. "Mara, sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding."
No misunderstanding, Dad.
Serena made an unauthorized leadership change. The contract is very specific about what happens when that occurs. Unauthorized. Serena's voice went shrill. "I'm the CEO of Ellison Dynamics, sure. A company that, as of 30 days from now, will have no proprietary technology, no diagnostic capabilities, and no way to fulfill about 90% of its client contracts." I pulled up a document on the conference room screen. This is the incorporation filing for Ellison Dynamics. Notice the owner listed. Mara Ellison. 100%. This is the equity structure. Notice Serena's ownership stake. 0%. And these are the licensing agreements between Blackline Systems and Ellison Dynamics, showing that every piece of technology you've been taking credit for is owned by a separate company. My company. Serena had gone white. You can't. I can and I am. You called me obsolete, Serena. In front of 200 people. You demoted me to a consulting role in a company I built. So now you can consult me on how to run Ellison Dynamics without any of the technology that makes it worth anything. This will destroy everything we've built, Dad said, and the pronoun choice wasn't lost on me. Everything I built, I corrected. You watched her humiliate me. You nodded along when she called me a supporting player. You've spent 3 years letting her take credit for my work, and you never once stood up for me. Mara, please. I'm giving you a choice, I said, cutting him off. Option 1. Serena resigns as CEO, issues a public statement correcting the record about who actually built this company, and we restructure with actual equity agreements and real oversight. I retain majority control of both entities, because I've earned it. Or, Serena asked, voice barely a whisper. Or I terminate the licensing agreements, you try to run a tech service company with no tech, and I watch Ellison Dynamics collapse from the same consulting capacity you demoted me to. I stood up. You have 24 hours to decide. I walked out of that conference room the same way I'd walked out of the ballroom 3 days earlier, calmly, quietly, with my head held high. This time, nobody applauded. The next 24 hours were chaos. My phone exploded with calls I didn't answer. Texts from Mom begging me to reconsider. Emails from Dad promising changes. Nothing from Serena until hour 23. It was a single line, fine. The public statement went out the next day. Serena Ellison stepping down as CEO, citing personal reasons. A correction to previous media coverage, acknowledging Mara Ellison as founder and primary technology developer. An announcement of a new organizational structure with proper equity distribution and governance. Reading it felt like swallowing glass. Not because it wasn't satisfying, it was. but because it meant accepting that my family had valued image over integrity so completely that only mutually assured destruction could make them tell the truth. Mom didn't speak to me for 6 months. Dad tried, awkwardly, sending emails about the weather and Harbor Point High's football season, never mentioning what happened. Serena moved to Seattle, took a job at Amazon, sent me a single text on my birthday that year. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Ellison Dynamics survived, barely. We lost some clients who didn't want to deal with the drama. But the technology was good enough that most stayed, and the honest story, scrappy founder builds company from nothing, fights back against corporate betrayal, actually played well in certain circles. We restructured. I brought in outside management for operations, kept myself focused on technology and strategy. Hired people based on competence instead of genetics. Built something that could outlive family politics. 1 year after the birthday party, we crossed 30 million in revenue. I sat alone in my office that day, looking at the numbers, feeling none of the joy I thought I would. Victory was supposed to feel triumphant. Instead, it felt quiet and sad and lonely. Daniel knocked on my doorframe. You okay? I don't know. For what it's worth, he said, you did the right thing. Did I? I destroyed my relationship with my family over a company. They destroyed your relationship when they decided the company was more important than seeing you. He sat down across from me. You didn't start this fight, Mara. You just refused to lose it quietly. Maybe he was right. Maybe standing up for yourself, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted, is its own kind of victory. I see Serena sometimes, in LinkedIn updates and mutual friends' Instagram stories. She looks successful and happy in Seattle. We've never spoken beyond that one apology text. Maybe we never will. Dad retired last year. He sold me his advisor share for $1 and moved to Florida with Mom. We talk once a month, careful conversations about nothing important. The love is still there, I think, buried under years of resentment and disappointment. But the trust? That might be gone forever. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd said something earlier. If I'd fought back the first time Serena took credit, the first time Dad praised her vision over my execution, the first time Mom called my work sweet, like it was a hobby. But I know the answer. I would have been the problem. The jealous sister, the difficult employee, the one who couldn't handle success. They needed to push me all the way to humiliation before they could see what they'd been doing all along. And even then, they only saw it because I made the cost unbearable. I'm not going to tell you that everything worked out perfectly, that I found some greater happiness in proving them wrong. This isn't that kind of story. I'm successful, yes. I have a company worth $40 million. I have respect in my industry, awards on my shelf, articles that finally spell my name right. But I eat Thanksgiving dinner alone.
Christmas too.
My nephew, Serena's kid, doesn't know me. My parents send cards with increasingly formal signatures, Thomas and Evelyn, instead of Mom and Dad. That's the real cost of being underestimated and then proving everyone wrong. You win the battle but lose something deeper, something you can't buy back with any amount of success. So here's what I want you to take from this story, if you're still watching. If you're the one being overlooked, being minimized, being called support staff, while someone else claims your achievements, document everything. Protect your work. Build your leverage quietly before you need it. But more importantly, ask yourself what you're willing to lose. Because standing up for yourself isn't free. It costs relationships, peace, the comfortable lie that family will always have your back. Sometimes the cost is worth it. Sometimes you'd rather be alone and respected than surrounded by people who only see you when you're useful. And sometimes, like right now, sitting in this office with its expensive furniture and empty halls, you're not sure which choice you actually made. They taught me that family can break you. That blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and love doesn't prevent cruelty. They taught me that sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. But I taught myself something too. I taught myself that I could survive their betrayal. That I could stand in a room full of people applauding my humiliation and walk out with my spine straight. That I could look at the ruins of everything I'd built and find the one piece they couldn't take. My knowledge, my skills, the things that lived in my head and my hands. They couldn't make me obsolete, no matter how many times they called me that. Because I was never just supporting the foundation. I was the foundation. And when they tried to build without me, the whole thing collapsed. There's power in that realization, even if it comes with loneliness. There's strength in knowing exactly what you're worth, even if nobody else wants to admit it. So no, this isn't a happy ending, but it's an honest one. And sometimes, after being lied to for so long, honesty is the only victory that matters. Before you go, drop a comment and let me know, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have handled it differently? And if you made it this far, you know the drill. Subscribe because there are more stories like this one, stories about people who refuse to stay invisible. I didn't lose my company the day I walked out of that ballroom. I found myself instead. And that's worth more than all the applause in the world.